It just sounds like no matter what they do, you're just saying, we'll make our case. Our train has left the station. We're not budging for Trump.
So let's not say it's our train, it's the global train. The world is going in this direction. The markets are going in this direction. And so we're going to take advantage of it.
Well, that was Environment Minister McKenna, still ever hopeful that U.S. President Donald Trump will change his mind and actually sign the Paris Accord, kind of like how Linus is ever hopeful of the Great Pumpkin appearing on Halloween Eve. Well, my next guest is certainly no fan of the Paris Accord. His name is Marc Morano. He is the publisher of ClimateDepot.com. And hey, Marc, how you doing today?
I'm doing very well, David. Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for spending some time with us. Now, Marc, before we get into our discussion, I have to show our folks out there, in case they missed it the first time around, what you did to a copy of the Paris Accord last year in Marrakesh.
Sure. Global warming skeptics are rejoicing at Donald Trump being elected President of the United States. Yeah! He has pledged to withdraw the United States from the UN Paris Agreement. And in honor of that, today we have a copy of the UN Paris Agreement. We are going to, and helping you with your stages of grief about the death of the UN Paris Agreement, we are going to shred a copy of the UN Paris Agreement. We stand in solidarity with President-elect Trump, and this is going to be the first step toward doing it. This is our shredding of the document. Ceremonial. The delegates here seem to be in deep denial over President-elect Trump's policies.
You know, Marc, I love that clip. That got you arrested, I understand, or at least hustled out of that area by security. What was it, the carbon footprint that you incurred by operating that paper shredder?
Yeah, they got us. Actually, I mean, it depends. You can call it arrest or detained. We were escorted out by armed United Nations climate cops, tossed into the desert. Then they reapproached me and confiscated my bag, my papers, and detained me outside the conference, and it continued. And then other members of our party got essentially arrested the next day, had their phones confiscated. I mean, they weren't playing around. They were upset at us because they thought, you know, we were doing some, we didn't have the proper permutation, so we were doing it unauthorized in their eyes. But people were doing that all day. They just didn't like the message. They didn't like the cardboard cutout. In fact, there was one of the participants there went and immediately told security to get us out. And security swept in on us immediately and shut us down shortly after the clip you just showed.
Wow, the UN climate police. You know, it reminds me of that Super Bowl ad from a few years ago for Audi with the green police to the tune of Dream Police. I mean, absolutely surreal. But Marc, before we go on, in a nutshell, for those in our audience that, you know, are not up to snuff on the Paris Accord, what exactly is this document?
Well, interesting. I heard your Environmental Minister McKenna say, oh, it's a train and everyone's getting on the train. This is the most expensive treaty in world history, according to an analysis by statistician Bjorn Lomborg. It will do absolutely, if you do care about, if you are worried about global warming, let's put it that way, if you believe the UN and Al Gore and you're panicked, you can't sleep at night, this would have no impact, even if the UN was right on the science, right on their models, and all the countries did their pledges. It would delay the temperature on 100 years by about 3 years, not even a measurable difference. So this would do nothing if you're worried about global warming. But what it will do is centrally plan our energy economy, empower United Nations bureaucrats, cost a boatload of money, and essentially just redistribute wealth. That's what the United Nations IPCC official, a guy named Edenhofer, said a few years ago. We will redistribute wealth by climate policy. That's what they're looking at doing. And that's all this treaty is. It's completely meaningless if you're actually worried that we face a climate catastrophe. And so the idea that it's leaving the station, it's a bunch of countries making pledges that aren't verifiable necessarily and not even enforceable. And it's based on, you know, decades into the future and 100 years in the future. No one's even paying attention. No train is leaving the station. And there's no reason to have a seat at the so-called table. What Canada should do, what the United States is doing, is we've upended the table. The hell with the table. We don't need a seat at a table that is meaningless to the climate and that actually affects sovereignty and huge economic costs and empowers the UN for no climate gain. It makes no sense on literally every conceivable level.
You know, that's amazing, Mark. I mean, this is a train that should be derailed, given all the baggage, the bad baggage that it carries. But what in the world is Catherine McKenna going on about that she seems to think, or that she's confident or hopeful that President Trump is going to do a reversal on the Paris Accord? I understand just a week ago, President Trump was bragging about getting out of the Paris Accord.
He was. Now, there's two reasons she's probably bragging, and you can't fault her for being hopeful on some small level. But the first reason is Donald Trump himself. You know, right now, Donald Trump's having his own problem with immigration. Is he going to give amnesty? Is he not going to give amnesty? And there's a lot. I think Donald Trump can at times send confusing signals. He has not sent confusing signals on climate. And maybe McKenna is hopeful that he'll be confusing like he is on immigration. However, the real hope that McKenna has is because a top White House official, Gary Cohen, who Trump brought in from Wall Street, a registered Democrat, has been very noisy about climate change and the UN Paris Agreement. So he, without any basic on his own, I should say, as a rogue, is hosting a meeting with other nations' environmental ministers, including Catherine McKenna, I believe. And so they're meeting Monday. And so McKenna has, understandably is excited. Here's a top Trump administration official meeting about global warming and going to talk about the Paris Agreement. But I don't think Gary Cohen has any power, influence, and I don't think Donald Trump would ever betray the voters who put him there. And that was one of his core promises. But to give McKenna some premise, yeah, she's got a top White House official luring her in. And there's another top White House official, the State Department Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson, has actually signed the U.S. on to that Arctic Canadian, I think it was Arctic Inuit agreement that basically endorsed the United Nations treaty back in May and June. So there is some confusion, but I think that's more the nature of the Trump administration, where you have officials talking out of all sides of their mouth. But on this issue of climate, Donald Trump has been solid.
And tell me too, Mark, in terms of this being any kind of an election issue, we'll be going to the polls in about 2 years in this country. It'll be longer than that, of course, in the U.S. But I mean, is this any kind of issue that any political party can make electoral hay about, that they support, or on the other hand are against the Paris Accord? Or is this simply a non-issue? And what we're watching right now is so much kabuki theater and virtue signaling.
It's definitely kabuki theater virtue. However, no, the only issue that the UN Paris Agreement would ever have be an issue is among United States conservatives. They are excited and get motivated when they hear talk, people trashing the UN and getting out of the UN. In fact, Hillary's new book, Hillary Clinton's out giving her book tour. She actually has a page in there about a CEO of a coal company in West Virginia who's going to jail for essentially not protecting his miners. And on a couple days before he went to jail, he went to a rally in West Virginia, who couldn't stand the UN Paris Agreement, who can't stand the EPA climate regulations based on global warming that were shutting them down, cheered this convicted coal baron and actually said they'd vote for him for president. This was a formerly Democratic state. So yes, it is a huge campaign issue. Hillary Clinton couldn't even show her face in West Virginia because they hated it and despised her. And she writes about this in her book, how someone going to jail was 10 times more popular than she could in the state of, and she was in the state of West Virginia. So it's a huge issue among a very vocal and passionate division. Now, even the liberals care about it, but it's not a motivating issue. Maybe the Hollywood liberals would get excited about a candidate talking about staying in the UN Paris Agreement, but the rest of America could care less.
Wow. And well, Mark, we have to wrap up soon, but I can't let it go without saying I noticed with the hurricanes that are pounding the U.S. and the Caribbean, yet again, the climate change Cassandras are saying, aha, see, more proof. And I noticed on your website today that one of the lead stories was Mark Ruffalo, a.k.a. the Incredible Hulk, having a GoFundMe page to send Rush Limbaugh into the eye of the hurricane. Tell me, this is a member of the caring, loving, virtuous left. He wouldn't want to preach death and destruction to anyone, would he?
Well, they do, and that's the funny thing. He actually talks about compassion and tolerance, but it has to be with ideas that they accept and that are okay. Mark Ruffalo is what I call a death wish, trying to send Rush Limbaugh into the hurricane. There's a long history of this, of climate activists. And I have in there Nobel Prize winners and others, economists, who actually say in the past they wish for bad tornadoes, they wish for hurricanes, because it will help convince the American public that climate action like the UN treaty is necessary. And this is a whole cottage industry of people wishing for harm and destruction so that they can come in as climate ambulance chasers and exploit the tragedy, which is what they've done with both Irma and Harvey now, exploiting it. And by the way, all these headlines, this is what climate change looks like, Irma and Harvey. I actually, at the website, and actually in the piece you mentioned at the top of the website, go through all the history of hurricanes going back to the early 2000s, where every hurricane is the face of global warming and climate change. It's all pre-written, just waiting for the next disaster to happen.
Wow. Well, there you have it, folks. Whether it's the UN climate police or the Incredible Hulk himself, these are not good people. Marc Morano, thank you so much for your time. It was a delight.
Hey, if you like that, sign up for my show every day. Click on the screen to subscribe.